You've got a number of horror films under your belt at this point. What draws you to the genre?
What still drives me, or what originally drove me was just my love of horror, and what still drives me is the same thing, I think. And I'll try and answer that in a probably better way, but I love the fact that when you're within it's not, I don't call them the confines of a genre, because it's not confined, but you're in a kind of very big safety net, if you like, where you can go do as many radical things as you want. As long as you're within the genre, you're allowed to do it, and it feels so it allows you to do things like, I think all of the films I've done are different, and this one is a horror story more than it is a horror movie, but it still fits within the kind of the witch movie. So I kind of like being in and I don't just think it's a horror genre, I think it's in genre. I like being in genre because I think it allows you to do. I actually think that genre movies today are doing more interesting things than the dramas. And if you look at the Oscars this year, Black Swan's a genre movie, Inception's a genre movie. So I think some of the best stuff that's being made is in genre, I think.
And like you said, you're staying within the horror genre, but you've also got like mysteries, you've got some suspense thrillers. I mean, you've done a little of everything, and now this is kind of like almost like a horror period piece.
It is, yeah. It's like it's almost like my costume drama. That's what I look at it as. The first few days on set were weird because I was looking around at everyone in costumes and all these wenches with this like kind of medieval wenches, and I was going, this is kind of cool, but I hope this becomes really good. And because you get you're very reminded when you see everyone in costume. When you walk on a set, obviously everyone's in makeup and it's not normal, but when they're in regular clothes, you kind of it feels less different. But within 2 days, I wasn't thinking about the costumes, as you probably can tell.
So is going with something like this like a good way to keep it fresh for you?
I just love the story. When it came to me, the script, I read it and I thought that it's a new world that's not been done. It started with the line 1348, a terrible plague is sweeping through Europe, and I was like, whoa, it's a meaty beginning. And I just then worked with the writer and we pushed it more to give it this modern slant. And what I find really interesting about the film is, even though it's 600 years ago, so much of what you're seeing on the screen then is still in the news today. And it really makes you realise that 600 years, 60 years, 6 minutes, it's not really much different. The kind of relationship aspects aren't much different.
And now your other 3 features you wrote and directed. This is your first one that you just directed?
No, it's the same really. Severance was written by James Moran, and then I worked on it with him after and got a credit on it. This one, I did a lot of the development side, but I wasn't actually writing it. We wanted to make sure that we had one writer in terms of the world, the voices. Dario's brilliant at he really has an amazing way of creating medieval characters. The way they speak and everything that you hear in the movie is all kind of, the language is Dario, and it's got this. It's a strange script because when you read the lines, they're very, it's where do you pitch old language, and Dario got it bang on right, and I think he kind of used the model that they used in Gladiator, which is that there's a trace of it, but it's not ye, yay, yo, kind of oldie worldy speak, but people talk properly, and in those days people would tell a story. I think what the script does so well is it creates the pace with which people would speak. If they're sitting around a table now, there's 5 guys talking, there's a TV on in the background, the internet's on, the radios, everything's on, everyone's trying to get their minute to be heard. In those days, if you're a good storyteller, you sit and tell a story. So all of that's in the script.
So where did you step in?
In terms of my creativity on it, with the first half of the script that you see is very much the movie of the first half of the movie. The second half of Dario's script was an entirely different film. It became a supernatural film. Carice was the devil. The village was different. It ended completely differently. There was no cages, and I wanted the film I was reading for the first 60 pages to continue all the way to the end. So I came in with Dario and I said, look, let's come up with this village and create this utopia. And then we obviously had to think of what is it that they want that is different to what the characters want. So that's how we come up with the idea that if you want to live in this village, you have to renounce God because they don't believe in the same God. How is the plague kept at bay? What powers have they got? All this is new. In the original script, Carice Van Houten was the devil. And literally she was the devil, and I wanted it to be if hell exists on Earth, then how much worse is it going to be than in the middle of the plague world? And I wanted to keep the ending that he had, which was that in the end the character is in hell, but I didn't want him to be in the flames of hell with the real devil, because one, I don't know what that is, and two, I can't imagine how you would ever shoot a sequence where you're in the flames of hell. I always think it always ends up, however good a job you do, you're in what dreams may come. You end up in a fantasy CGI world, and I didn't want to do that. So, but I also want him to be in hell. Like, hell is where that character's left at the end. So a lot of stuff I did in terms of the structural change to make it this movie. But as I say, Dario was the one who was writing the dialogue, and weirdly it was financed before. So the good thing about, and it happened so rare, but the good thing about the film is one of the good things is that when I joined the project, they said that I think it was February, and they said we're filming in April, and we're financed. Do you want to come involved? There was another director that had developed the script with a devil version of the script, which I changed, but it was all ready to go. So in terms of the costumes and all of that, weirdly, whether you're hiring medieval monks' outfits or designer clothes for the characters to wear, ultimately the job is the same. Production design love a period film because their work is very obvious what they've done. If you've decorated this room and this backdrop, you may have spent a bit of time on it, but when you walk into it, you go, oh, it looks like a room in a place in a New York loft. But the production design team have probably worked on it for 3 weeks. But when you build a village, you go, oh, it's a village. So that was true, and also the way we approached the film is we always wanted it to be as real as possible. So we would always try to find the real places. And if we couldn't use the real places, we would build to match the real places. So it feels very authentic, I think, because we approached it as though we were filming in, say, downtown New York, and it has that spirit. I hate these big medieval movies or these big, studio pictures that you see where it feels like you're on the back lot in some studio in Los Angeles, and everyone has just got off Malibu Beach, and all the actors are acting like they're just off Malibu Beach, and they've all got really good teeth, and they're all muscled up, and everyone's really healthy. And I remember we were on the very first day, and Eddie Redmayne, who's brilliant. Eddie Redmayne was then in Pillars of the Earth, and he's been in New York. He won a Tony this year. He's a brilliant actor. He comes on, and he's a very handsome guy, and his teeth are nearly black. And then the girl who plays Avril, his girlfriend, she comes on, and she's looking cleaner, and I'm thinking she hasn't had her mud put on her yet, but I'll just wait. And we're just about to turn over, and Eddie says, do you think she's a bit clean? And she goes, no, I'm really dirty, I'm dirty. There was no mud on her, so we put more on. She still looks too clean, I think, to be a little wench. But everyone was really filthy and muddy the whole time.
So speaking of your cast, how'd you go about casting? Did people come in for, the standard audition, or did you seek anyone out?
Well, it was a mixture of... Sean was already attached when I got involved, and I thought, Sean's attached. They gave me the chance to use anyone. I said, oh, of course you want Sean, he's amazing. So Sean was always going to play Ulrich. And then we just literally looked at tapes. I saw Eddie Redmayne do not an audition for me, but an audition for the previous director, and I thought he was terrific, so we gave him the lead. And then everybody else came from the casting department, really, from the casting director and ideas. But all of the men were really hers, with the exception of John Lynch, who plays Wolfston, who I'm a big fan of. So I said about John. I think she suggested him. And then Carice Van Houten was my suggestion because Carice is just amazing, and the chance to work with someone like her, I think she is one of the best actresses working in movies today. I think, in terms of what she does everything differently to how you would expect. So. If you say to someone, come here, Carice will say, come here, and she'll do this kind of, she brings a new level to the performance she's giving that is just what great actors do.
She's quite the creepy character.
Yeah, but she's not like that at all. She's just the funniest, fun girl ever, and you really won't meet a nicer person than Carice Van Houten.
Well, you do get a sense of that in the beginning when she's all, warm and welcoming. Yeah, she sells both parts pretty well.
But all of the wit that comes into it, I was giving everyone. I mean, I have a freedom of shooting style, so I want everyone to bring stuff to the thing. I'm not someone who says, right, you have to hit this mark, you have to hit that mark. There's a comma in that line, you have to use it. I'm not one of them. I'm very much, but only if you're good. If you're really good, you can make it funnier. So all of the stuff she does. When she's being nice to the boy and she's a little bit weird and her hands are she says, why are you doing this to me? And she says, because I like you. And she's but it shouldn't work, but it works. And all of that came from Carice. So.
So it's always good having like a laid back attitude like that, but what do you do when you have more action heavy scenes where people actually have to hit their mark?
It's not a laid back attitude. I'm not laid back. Believe me, they'll say, is that how you see yourself? You're not laid back. Well, everything, it depends on what the movie you're working on is, because when you're working on a movie like this, we shot this film in just over 6 weeks, and you need 8 weeks to shoot this film. And so we were in an incredible rush to get everything done the way we wanted it. But fortunately, all of the actors everything they did was great. We weren't carrying anyone, there was no weak link in that chain. So when we do stuff like the fight sequences, what I would do is go along to the rehearsals with the stuntmen early on. Stuntmen ordinarily will come up with flashy samurai type moves, and I said I don't want any of that. I want the swords to feel like they're heavy. I want the men to feel like any one of them could die at any moment. So we fed into it. We backpedaled a logic of what would realism be like in this situation. Then they would rehearse that, and then once we're on set, we were filming it with them having their marks. But obviously, I mean, what you see in the movie in the fight is 99% is them doing it. So we've got them to a good speed where they can actually hit each other. So the real actors are doing it, because it all gets a bit choreographed. Because and you can feel it. So we wanted to stay away from that.
So are the swords they're carrying, are those like as
they're real
heavy
swords,
as they look?
but they're not as heavy. They're slightly made of slightly lighter material, but they are metal and they are blunted. They are I mean, you're going to get hurt if you get hit. The thing to do though is the way. I mean, they're heavy. You wouldn't be able to do that with one hand. But the real swords of those days were so heavy you couldn't. The fights that you'd really see would be that's how it really be. But we've got used to, certainly in medieval stuff, in anything that becomes fantasy, everyone's doing samurai moves, and samurai swords are light. Swords in English medieval wars were not.
Are the costumes they're wearing heavy too then?
No, the costumes are they're not as would be. They're kind of the lighter materials of some. I mean, some of them were. Wolfston's the big chest plate. He would be literally running sweat. He lost weight during the filming. And the weather was fortunately cold for the first half of the film and sunny for the second, because we filmed it in April, May, and we shot it in sequence. So the very first day is the very first thing you see, and the very last shot we do is Eddie in the flames. Pretty much it's shot in order because we could. Because the reason movies are all shot out of order usually is because of actor availability. Like, you may have Brad Pitt for a week and he's in the beginning, the middle and the end. We had everybody for the whole time, so we thought, well, let's just shoot it in order. So what's nice is that every day they finish a scene, the next day is the next day, and the next day.
That is a very unusual
It's
treat
very
to
unusual,
have there.
but it feeds into the film, I think, because you suddenly. And what was weird though is that we knew we'd made a good film for the first 3 weeks, and then we arrive in the forest, and we look through the forest and we can see the village. And we go, oh, in the village there's going to be Carice, there's going to be Tim, and all these other people. What if they're no good? What if they're no good? So we were all kind of hoping they were going to be good, and they were brilliant, so it's fine. But
it still kind of reflects like the actual, like how the characters would feel on screen. Like they finally get through this epic journey and they've reached that place, and they don't know what to expect, so it's kind of the same thing.
But there was one scene in the scene when they all creep into the village, and you have that moment when they all creep in, and then Sean agrees to lay down their weapons and go with them. In the script that we'd written and Darren had written and I developed, all the men follow Sean's word and go in. What happens on the film is that one of the actors said, well, I wouldn't just accept that. I don't care who he is. So they have an argument and a row. What the hell is going on? Because you need to take all of that tension and reflect on it. Well, the audience will think, well, why have they just gone in? Because the men are thinking, anyway. The good thing about when you have the casting right, actors will speak up. Because when you're doing a million things, sometimes a word from an actor, shouldn't I be arguing with Sean here? And you go, yeah, you should. Sometimes actors just do that to get more lines, but not this crew. They were good.
So speaking of shooting in sequence, it kind of makes me think of something like Triangle. Mm-hmm. So what was it like on that? Like, how do you jump from spot to spot?
Well, Triangle was, for me, it was fine because I'd written it, so I knew exactly where I was. I think for crews, it's important that you know that everyone knows where they are, so that they're not just turning some lights on. I think the best is when everyone knows what they're making, and I think from film to film, what I would always want to do now and try my hardest to do is make sure everybody knows what scene they're doing, because the hard thing for that was that the director's just like this madman running around going, okay, now we're in loop 3 looking back on loop 2, and but it's not rocket science. It's not really hard.
Speaking of Triangle, though, I feel like that was just such it was like an after the fact disappointment. It was so overlooked.
Oh, it's
and
ridiculous.
It was completely missed.
No, I have no idea why that was. In England it did okay in the cinema, and it's got a big, but I don't know. I wish, because Magnolia have done such a brilliant job with Black Death. I just wish they'd had it. So it's a real shame. I don't know what happened.
Is there anything you took from that one, like in terms of that issue, and tried to bring it here?
No, because there's no issue. There was no issue. It's just I think there's a number of reasons that mostly it's to do with it's not the sort of thing I'll tell you after what I think, because it's not, there's nothing sinister, but it's a multitude of things, and it isn't the film, because like Melissa's brilliant in the film, and the film is really twisted and clever. So it's not the film; it's just a number of things. How much it cost to sell. It's a number of things. So I know people will find that movie and they'll always go back and go, that was like that's probably your best or one of your best movies. Why was that not? Yeah, but that's fine.
What do you want people to enjoy about this and to take from it?
Well, I make films that I love, the stories that I think would be interesting, and I think I've got a low attention span, and if I find it interesting, chances are without saying it to sound smug or silly, it probably is interesting. I try to not just do something straight down the line. So I think what you'll take from this film is you'll get a guys on a mission movie in medieval England where there's witches and there's violence and all the things all the boxes you need to tick for genre are there, but you also get a kind of very interesting meditation on what it is to be a fundamentalist, and how fundamentalism can be used by people, and how religion can be used by the wrong people in the wrong hands to corrupt innocent people. And I think that's very relevant today, obviously.
And of course you need to enjoy the release of this movie, but I'm sure you've got some plans. So anything in mind for
tonight?
Next up? Tonight I'm
going to a party in New York.
Yes.
Sometimes I have to my friends, because I come from a very normal comprehensive school. It's different in England, but basically a public school here is not the same in England, but come from just a pretty run-down public school. All my friends always remind me when I sort of go, oh, I'm really stressed, I'm really busy. They say, Chris, you're doing the best job in the world that anyone could ever do. You're lucky as hell, and that's how I feel. So tonight, in my tough world, I've got to go to a party in New York and get drunk and watch my film. So I'm very lucky, yeah.
And are you working on anything else?
I'm working on 2 films at the moment. There's a number of things that are in the pipeline. 2 things that I'm writing. One is a werewolf movie, which is a really twisted, funny, mad movie about a werewolf, which I'm going to do, which is not silly funny, but really demented, naughty. The sort of humour where you go, I can't believe they've done that. Like Four Lions, like Tarantino stuff, his films are always funny, but they're not comedies. I'm going to do something like that, and I'm also doing a film noir, which is going to be a really clever, twisted film noir road movie from LA to Vegas. I figured if I could start off in LA, make a movie, drive across the desert, and then spend all of my earnings in Vegas, and then fly home.